Hello, folks. This is Alan Ibrahim, VP of Content at AMA Boston, introducing today's episode of Talking Marketing. The story behind this one is pretty interesting. I found out about Prasanna Dhungel via our contact page. One of the folks at GrowByData actually reached out to us via the AMA Boston contact and said, hey, I have this person at our company who's really interesting and wants to talk to you guys and likes your podcast. His name's Prasanna. Let's get in touch. Not the most common way that we find guests up for Talking Marketing, but it really worked out well. I gave him the opportunity to chat with me, and we ended up, instead of our usual 30, almost went in a full hour. And this is before the podcast recording. And Prasanna has a wonderful energy. You'll get that sense from the podcast, but just so kind and patient. And he's such a good listener, too, which was like, it kind of threw me off as a podcast host and as an interviewer, being asked questions myself. That happened both in the prep call and in the episode, so you'll get to hear me blush a little bit as that happens. But yeah, we discuss such topics as the evolution of search engines and how GrowByData is helping marketers figure out search, the evolution of the Google search results page and how that has completely transformed the way we seek information online. And of course, we also touched on AI technology like ChatGPT and Bing AI, because that's been in the news a lot. And we also discussed the potential of that, changing how search works. So I really hope you guys enjoy the episode. Our schedule is going to be a little weird for 2023, at least starting off, because our February guest had to move. And that means that some of our episodes are going to be backed up a little bit. But it's all evergreen, and it's going to be coming out at a pretty regular schedule after that. So stay tuned to the Talking Marketing feed on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to it. Give us a review or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you are interested, you or your company, in sponsoring Talking Marketing, you can reach out to our sponsorship team by emailing sponsorship@amaboston.org. We have multiple different packages available. We can do an episode about your company. We can have ad breaks referencing your company for several episodes in a row. Just worth reaching out if that's something that you or your company may be interested in. And lastly, before I let you guys into the episode, the amaboston.org website has a job board if you want to work at a company similar to GrowByData that's evolving and thinking about how search is evolving. Just go to amaboston.org and click on jobs, and you'll see a whole fun variety of interesting jobs that we are offering for volunteers and members of AMA Boston. That's what I have for now. So please enjoy my discussion with Prasanna Dhungel. Hello and welcome to Talking Marketing, an AMA Boston podcast where I chat with marketing professionals across various industries, and I try to get to the core of what makes their work impactful, educational, and inspirational. I'm Alan Ibrahim, your host and director of content for the American Marketing Association's Boston chapter. And today I'm back with another episode, and I'm very excited to welcome today's guest, Prasanna Dhungel. Prasanna, he is the co-founder and managing founder of GrowByData. And he is a great marketer and a great person who I've interacted with a couple times now. And I'm very excited. Prasanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Alan. I appreciate this opportunity to chat with you again and share my experiences and learning with the broader marketing community here in Boston and beyond. And I hope that, just as I have learned from many who have graciously shared their learnings, I'm hopeful that some of our dialogue and learnings will be equally helpful to many.
Yeah, I think they will be, because even from our brief conversation, it seems like we have a lot of insight and we can get really into the weeds on some stuff that I think is in the conversation right now. That's actually part of the reason why, for folks who are confused about our sort of adjusted podcast schedule, why Prasanna is being pushed up. He was initially intended as my June guest, and we had some shifting. So now here he is as our March guest of sorts. So let's get into it. GrowByData, the company that you've been running for several years. On our previous call, we came up with this sort of fun slogan that you guys are explaining the change. Can you tell us a little bit about GrowByData and how they've been explaining the change for the past 9 years?
Absolutely. So GrowByData today is a marketing intelligence partner company for brands and agencies. And what we do is we help brands really understand their visibility on Google, as well as e-commerce platforms like Amazon, and
Mm-hmm.
then really help them understand what's happening and maximize, right? That's where we are. But if I go back to our roots 9 years ago, we started when we were in a data sparse society, I say, it was like really the beginning of big data. This was in the
Right.
early 2010 decade. And companies were really getting on the e-commerce bandwagon, and so the way we explained and helped change was, retailers and brands wanted to, get their product catalog online, get their product on Amazon, and so we helped with that by supporting that. Then, when you're on Amazon, brands were realizing that, you want to be really offering the best prices.
Mm-hmm.
So, and prices were varying a lot. So we helped retailers really understand how prices were varying and what prices they should charge. What that ended up doing is it was literally a race to the bottom with everyone cutting prices. That was unsustainable. And more, as we shoppers, became familiar with e-commerce, then it got into a lot of branding, and today uh, we are okay sometimes paying more for a delightful experience. And so what we do is, you might be a shoe company, you might be like, say, Nike, and you're
Mm-hmm.
advertising, you're offering shipping, you are offering promotions. Yet, your business struggles if, you're not on par with Adidas or some other brand. So there, and it's always changing. And so we help explain the change and help these brands do well. So, Alan, to your summary, we, e-commerce has been changing, digital has been changing, shoppers have been changing, and we try to help our clients understand the change and maximize the impact, of the limited budget that they have.
Yeah, we discussed an example of, like you said, shoe shopping and how you're not only examining like where you rank in things like search, which we're going to talk a lot about, but also your competitors, where they ranking and why are they trending in certain directions. And in general, what's going on with the media. There are so many aspects of change that marketers need to understand. And it sounds like GrowByData at least is aiming to simplify and explain some of that change into a consumable format for the marketers.
Absolutely. So like you might be in the shoe category, or you might be like, say, trying to get an oil change,
Mm-hmm.
in the weekend. And so if you're like an, oil company like Meineke or another one out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get leads when people search, they find you, they realize that you're a good brand, offering a great service for the right price and convenient. And so all of these really go into us purchasing that.
Right.
And as a brand, if you're not really on top of how you're being perceived by buyers, or what competition is doing in terms of a coupon,
Mm-hmm.
then you lose. And so it's
Right.
exactly all of these dynamics that we're helping companies really be on top of.
And it sounds like you've been pretty successful. That's your company, and let's talk about you a little bit. You mentioned a bit about, excuse me. You mentioned a bit about your career path starting in data, actually. So beginning with engineering training, riding the dot-com bubble at a startup in the 2000s, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And so I'm curious about you, and always I try to come back to the person here, like how all of that you feel led to where you are now, going from data into technology. Where do you feel like this journey has gotten to you to where you are?
Sure. So you're right. I mean, I have an engineering background, and
Hmm.
then I actually am a trained electrical engineer. We
No
started
kidding.
learned, yeah, yeah, I learned like telecom, as when at a time when we didn't have mobile phones in our hands, and I was
Hmm.
fascinated by that topic, and I thought, gee, I'm going to get a PhD. I was so much into it, but I realized after a while that I enjoy applying technology to help,
Hmm.
and so I started working in the telecom era. Company wasn't such a great experience.
Yeah.
In the first company, you learn some of the things not to do, and
Of
then
course.
over the years, I, in fact, went into healthcare data, then went into business school, and when I went into business school, I started consulting. And at that time, companies were really jumping on the data bandwagon, big data bandwagon, if you may.
Yeah.
But, it was very messy. And, there were a lot of issues I was finding, like common issues across companies. And that's how we kind of started GrowByData, essentially, to help, in fact, narrowly help like small to medium businesses in e-commerce. But that said, I think like the journey from data to technology to data is kind of very interrelated.
Yeah.
And
It sounds like it.
what is called AI, machine learning these days has been around for a long time. I think the
Hmm.
only difference is, I mean, some of the methodology has been around since like the 1940s and 50s. We just didn't have enough data. We just didn't have the computation power
Hmm.
back in the day. And yeah, I guess, we were not thinking, across disciplines, across, diverse groups, to really
Hmm.
make a solid decision. Today, it's like data, technology, AI, ML, whatever you want to call it. It's a combination of factors that have really transformed our lives. And it's fascinating. And while the opportunity is massive, I do think that, technology offers many things to us, but we need a very diverse group really providing input, and making sure that we do the right things in the future.
Right. It sounds What I love about that, by the way, is, I talk to so many folks about how they get into marketing, and people have different stories. Generally, the story seems to be they didn't expect to be here. We ended up here through circumstance, through a different career path, myself included. And it sounds like you were basically at a bunch of different companies where you said, this is one small thing that they could fix. This is one small thing they could fix. What if I was the fix? You kind of became the bandage for all of the different places that you worked at in a way. The data became or the technology became the solution to the data issues. Would you say that that's a little bit accurate?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think the genesis of the company comes from things I was experiencing not really working. It was like
Yeah.
path solutions, and it was like I created a framework on how data should be developed,
Hmm.
or used, not developed, but it's more used.
Used, right.
And using that methodology is what we've been applying all along.
Hmm.
And so that's on the technology side. But at the same time, I think the thesis around our customer experience, providing value to clients, to communities, I think that comes maybe from a lot longer, which
Right.
is like, how do you use technology to do the right things? When you are, building a company, how do you do the right things to your team members, to your communities? I think that comes from like, maybe my childhood through like, call it high school years, to even like,
Sure.
college years and beyond, and nonprofits that I was involved in.
Yeah.
So I think, this company today is many ideas that have been, many experiences that have been in my head. And over time, as we've added team members, it's also their ideas, right? So
Yeah.
that together it's, we create something that's impactful for clients, communities, and team members.
Yeah, you at least try, and you hope it is right.
Exactly. You
Ultimately,
try. Exactly.
and I think that's a good piece of advice, sort of, for younger people hearing interviews like this and wondering how they end up in places like you are. And it comes with time, right? Like you're saying, kind of answered those questions by seeing things change over time. So much of this is about transformation and evolution, and you just don't get that in your first year or 2 years at a
Nope.
company.
Nope. It takes a while, right? I think what I've realized is, while all of us as humans are impatient, right? We
Hmm.
want
Big time.
change today. We want our goals to be fulfilled today. We're on a sales call, right? You want clients to buy today, but that's not going to happen.
Hmm.
It takes effort. Like it takes a long time, and it takes sometimes, for many people to be convinced, right, for change to come. And you just have to be patient. You just have to kind of be at it, and
Right.
through. And I think you also have to expose yourself to
Right.
maybe experiences, many different people. So you can form, like I would say more a broad, holistic type of a perspective. But you're right, change rarely happens overnight. Let me say
No.
that.
And change is happening quickly and all the time and in different ways. Like we talked a lot about like education and how marketing education has to transform fast because we can't keep up. We literally can't keep up with the speed of it. We're going to talk about Google search in a little bit. And even in my young age, Google search has transformed since I started using it in so many ways.
Yep.
But speaking to the past a little bit, you mentioned your upbringing a little, and so you were raised in Kathmandu, Nepal, and you had, from my understanding, a sort of whirlwind tour of the United States between college and your postgraduate system as an adult. Obviously, that came with a little bit of culture shock, though, going from one place to another, and that you only knew about through like cinema and through television. Um, how do you feel like your culture and specifically your view of America, like from these Hollywood films, affected your path when you arrived here and you sort of started to dig roots in Massachusetts as an adult?
Yeah, yeah. You bring back nice memories. You're right. I mean, I'm born, raised in Kathmandu. I have roots there, family there. And so I got an opportunity to come to the United States, and study, thanks to Cornell University.
Hmm.
And when I was young, before I came here, my perspective was watching Hollywood movies. And this was a time when we didn't have the internet, as we know it.
Right, right.
So you just get a VHS tape and you put it um, uh, on your like device, and
Hmm.
you see the movies. And when I came here, um, or sorry, rather in the movies, I would see big like skyscrapers and all of that. And I come
Yeah.
to Ithaca, New York, which is a very rural community, right?
Right.
And so it was a big shock for me, from
Hmm.
what I saw to what I experienced. But that said, I think Ithaca, was a phenomenal experience. Like I think about it, 4 years,
Hmm.
it's really rural. The
Hmm.
school and the place grounds you. It makes you good. It makes you work hard. And if we're saying the weather in Boston is bad, Ithaca is even more interesting, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And yet through the thick and thin, right? Through the snowstorms, going to colleges, like going and working in a lab till 2 a.m. in the morning at a time when I didn't have a laptop in my
Wow.
dorm room, so I would walk 20 minutes uphill, to go back home and or to my dorm and sleep. I think all of these experiences made me like, and I went through it, I graduated, then I went to grad school. It's kind of, I think it made me realize that, you know, things happen, there's ups and downs. You just have to go through the process, and I think that's a incredible lesson I learned. And then from there I went to Princeton for grad school and I came to
Hmm.
Massachusetts.
Right.
Great experience working in two companies. Then I went to Chicago to go to business
Hmm.
school, started the company there. Chicago is another experience, right? Another kind of
Yeah.
a fascinating um, city with a very different kind of an industry. You meet a very different set of folks in the Midwest,
Hmm.
and as our company, and now I'm back in Boston, and to really push. But that said, I think each of these locations exposed me to different types of folks and have morphed me as a person. And I appreciate every experience, and hopefully, it's like living in different places, meeting different people, going around the world, hopefully doesn't make me biased. Gives me a broader perspective on what life is and what I should do and what I don't know, I guess.
Right. You know what you don't know. You know that there's plenty that you don't know. I
Absolutely.
Prasanna, I think what I appreciate about you, and specifically that part about Ithaca, is that people may talk about going uphill for 20 minutes and wear that as a badge of honor, as if like other people aren't doing it and they are somehow lesser than you. But you seem very humble about it, and like it shaped you and it informed the way that you think about work ethic. But you're not saying, or at least from how I'm understanding it, that everybody needs to do that or everybody needs to struggle like that or do it has to be hard for it to be worth it. So I appreciate that optimism a lot.
Yeah, I think, each of us, so, Ithaca was an experience for me, right? But it could be a very different experience for you versus someone else, right? We each
Yeah.
have our own experiences and we will each have our own uphill battles. But that said, right, it's like, how do you take that challenge, and transform it, your thinking into an opportunity? How do
Hmm.
you kind of take the challenge, like learn from it, get better is what I think at least, that's the way I've evolved. And, I think, I mean, I'd encourage, I think, no one is perfect. Nothing is perfect, even like starting a company, right?
Yeah.
Everything has imperfections. And it's really understanding that and really trying to tackle that is what I think we has probably like helped me as a person.
Yeah. Well, I think it's valuable too to specifically keep yourself open to new information, not to close yourself off. We have a lot of people in like the broader marketing world who view like they think it's important to learn knowledge, but at the end of the day, you just need to work hard and you need to put in the hours, and that's going to always pay off for you. And it sounds like you're not necessarily in the grind mindset, the like hustle culture sort of. I think as adults, we learn that that is sort of not a productive way to evolve. It's a really productive way to burn yourself out and try to retire early. But I think a lot of marketers are noticing that like that methodology just doesn't work anymore. Have you seen that? Are you familiar with this sort of like, you know, everybody else works 8 hours, so you need to work 10 kind of thing? And do you feel like that's where are the problems with that mindset?
Yeah, so I don't think that working longer necessarily leads to good output, right?
Yeah.
That's first. And yes, sometimes you just have to go through the experience. Sometimes you just have to work 10 hours, 12 hours to get it done, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you do. But
Yes.
that said, I think but you also need time to think,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, it's like whatever really works for you is what you have to figure out over time. And that will change over time, right? And
Yeah.
so, and like if it's really, you're working 5 hours, on a
Mm-hmm.
sort of on a Friday, and then you are taking the second half off, just to go hiking, around
Right.
the woods, and when you're walking, you're able to synthesize, you know, the learnings you had that week, the experience you had, and at the end of the hike, you come up with a better answer. I think that's more impactful. And so I don't claim to know the right answer,
Sure.
but I
Mhm.
don't think that just like continuing to push and having a hard and fast rule around, the way you work or how long you work or how you work, I don't think I can answer that question, or
Yeah.
anyone can, in fact.
Yeah, it's not to say that there's this sort of impression that some people say, "Oh, don't work hard anymore." If you don't, and it's not the case. It's more like you said, let yourself take the hike. Having a good rest ethic is as important as having a good work ethic. And being able to, especially in marketing, like being able to log out and to get away from social media and to get away from your work and think, okay, who am I as a person and what do I bring to the work? Because like I guess to speak personally, something I've realized as I come to enjoy and flourish with podcasting more is that it's not that I need to fit myself into the box of a company that I want to work at. It's that I need to show the company that my skill set is useful to them. So it's not always like if you work hard enough, you will succeed. It's also just rethink the way you think about work, you know? Um, I know that's a little bit of a tangent. It's just something that I've been thinking about a lot, and your story kind of like reflects a version of it that I like to think that I like to consider. So that's why I
Yeah.
bring that up.
No, I think that's a fair point, Alan, right? So we were talking about, the beach in Quincy, right? How
Hmm.
beautiful it is, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, that you have two options, right? One is you could be in front of your desk, or you're in your desk. You could be checking social media and you're running all these campaigns, right? One
Yeah.
campaign is LinkedIn, another email, and you're really in the depth, right, of looking at open rates, clicks rates, etc., right?
Yeah.
You could be in the weed, right? But if you maybe with all of that, you go for a walk on the beach, away from everything else, and let your mind distill everything together, and perhaps tie the different threads. Would you at the end of the day or end of the week be able to, go to your client or your colleague and say, hey, John, here's what I've noticed. Did
Hmm.
we think about this? And maybe, you kind of being the person through your activity, whatever it be, when your mind is more rested and undistracted. If
Right.
you're able to create that impact, that insight, maybe that insight alone will drive performance, right? And so, and I think marketing is such a creative activity,
Yeah.
and if you think about like art, right?
Mm-hmm.
You watch a Van Gogh art, it's not Boolean, right? I think I'm an engineer. I'm trained to think like bits and bytes.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not bits and bytes. It's very fuzzy, and I feel like marketing really uses creative sciences, right? And
Mm-hmm.
creative sciences needs time to think and see nature and ideate, and maybe some of the best pieces of marketing or the best pieces of art have been created by that free flow thinking. So I mean, I personally, I go for a walk, Alan. I
Yeah.
think I don't know if I told you last time, but I take calls as I'm walking
Oh,
because,
okay.
you know, I feel like I'm walking, my mind's, my body's, blood is flowing through my brains and maybe I'm getting better.
Right.
So, I don't think there's really one way. I think we have to kind of be figuring out where we are most productive and how we are most productive to generate the impact that we're
Yeah.
trying to generate personally, professionally. I don't know what you think. What do you think, Alan, on that?
It's really tough, right? Because I've worked a couple years in like really stressful jobs that I burned out of, like low level, even like retail jobs. And now that I've found a position that is a lot more low key, I myself as a younger person, I feel like I need to use my energy more. I need to work harder and be busier. To have a very active mind. Like I'm sure you can tell, like I'm jumping between thoughts all the time. And I want my work at the bare minimum, obviously, to pay my bills and to give me some basic level of fulfillment. But I also want to use my brain because I like have, my parents are older and I see how like not using it's like a muscle, right? Not using it can make it atrophy. So that's my ultimate goal with work is for it to engage me and to feel like it's not absorbing me. It doesn't define me, but it actually like gives me something to put my brain energy into. So
Right,
that's sort of how I feel about it.
right, right. And good work is also fulfilling, right? At a
True.
time when, we as a society are struggling with mental health, right?
Yep, big time.
Across the board, right? I think having the right kind of goal within life and work and being able to achieve that is very gratifying. And
Absolutely.
so, to your point, you might just be in the grind, but if you're not achieving your goal or the goals given to you, it becomes unfulfilling, and that
Exactly.
leads to many unfortunate circumstances.
True. Burnout and worse. So speaking of how you learn, what you appreciate about learning, in as somebody who's gone through a lot of the education system here in the States, you mentioned in our previous chat this idea. You prefer to apply theory as opposed to learning theory. And related to that, you feel like marketing is a quantitative art. Can you talk about what you like about learning theory as opposed or applying theory as opposed to learning it? Because I know there's so much out there, and sometimes it's like it's important to apply it, but people say, "Oh, well, you have to learn it first." If you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure, sure. So I'll give the example of my grad school, and my academic trainings, right? So I was so interested in wireless communication, as like the
Hmm.
cell phones were coming up. I said, you know what, like I love this. I should get a PhD. And so that
Hmm.
was my thought. But when I started the program, the grad school program, I was learning all kinds of theory,
Hmm.
but then after a while, I lost the context. What was
Right.
this ultimately going to be useful for?
Hmm.
And I realized that, I enjoy applying, these theories for, call it, doing good, helping businesses help, right? And I
Right.
really learned that, and then even like, and then coming back. And so, and over the years, like I enjoy learning. In fact, that's what motivates me. I'm getting better. I'm able to understand more. Then I went to business school, and business school was very applied
Of
management,
course.
and then it was even applied marketing. And now, like being in the marketing world,
Hmm.
marketing is very quantitative. You're right. We are. running, there's all these platforms that are coming up. Digitally, you have Google, Bing, Amazon, Walmart, so on. You have like so many social media campaigns. You're like doing digital branding and on and on. And when I really get into the depth of marketing, every campaign, every channel has its own campaign. Every campaign has all these metrics, and you can be trying to optimize to the nth degree,
Yes,
right?
of course.
And when you look at, you go online or you go to the bookstore, you see all these books written, right?
Hmm.
And so, there's experts who try to write new theory. And while I think, to me personally, I think, it's fun to understand how the industry is being stretched. I always find it's fun to like kind of understand how it's applied. That's what gives me a kick, and I think it's like when I'm able to use it and help clients, that's what really, you know gets me excited.
Right.
And again, this is like, I know that I want to be learning. I
Hmm.
want to be on top of some of the latest thinking, but I don't want to get into the academic depth. I really want to be able to apply it, and that's how I think I am best.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a realization I've had.
Yeah, you again though, you only come to it from years of trying to learn the theory and going, this is just not working. I'm finding more satisfaction, or like you're getting your kicks out of applying it and trying it in different scenarios as things change. I think that's pretty common actually. Most people I know in my experience are appliers, not learners necessarily.
Yeah, and a question for you, Alan, is, you've spoken to a lot of folks, like, and you may have gotten this question, right?
Yeah.
You may have asked this question, like, how have you found people who are fulfilled with their roles? To be thinking about, book learning versus applying, and does that vary,
Mhm.
right? So, as you've spoken, so is it like people who have self-reflected and understood what they like to
Yeah.
really be more fulfilled, more happier? You know, is that what you found? Like, it's a topic that I think about myself, which is, I don't claim to know the answer.
Hmm.
And is it really like self-reflection that helps you understand and take your path?
It's a it's a great question, Prasanna, and I think I've honestly seen people on both sides of that argument because I know people who absolutely find fulfillment from book learning, who even as adults, even late into life, will just pick up any book and learn and obsess over, the smallest topic of history or of marketing or sales or anything, just all the way in. Again, they want to read about it, they want to like absorb that information just to feel more full. And
Right.
then I've also seen people who are job jumpers. They want to try everything. They want to have tactile firsthand experience. I myself think I'm leaning a little bit more out into that. I'm somebody who likes to try things and do them myself because you can read about things all day, but applying them is a different task. And in terms of like fulfillment, I think most people I've interviewed on here found their fulfillment from a mixture of both, from letting yourself learn and accepting information, but also applying it and
Yeah.
keeping your skills fresh and up to date and new, because like we were saying, things are just changing very quickly. Um,
Right. Right.
I would say that's where most
Thank
people
you for
tend
the
to land.
context. It's an interesting discussion in itself.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. We could talk about like different learning methods all day.
Sure.
Um, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the weeds, though, in terms of a couple of things that are trending right now in the news. So, first of all, your company does a lot of work with Google's SERP, which for folks at home is the search engine results page. It's literally what comes up when you make a Google search. So, this is a really fascinating part of Google and like what they're doing right now. I'm curious, how do you feel the SERP has changed for better and for worse? And where is it at right now in context to where it was maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Sure. Sure. So, when we all were exposed to Google 10, 15 years ago, you would ask a question and it would be two types of links. One would be your classic organic links, which is what Google indexes and shows, and the second were paid. So let's take an example, right? You're planning a trip to New York City. So
Hmm.
you might search, what do I do in New York City, right? And 10 years ago, you would see um, like top 10 places to go in New York City, Central Park, or you might be like, the other could be, top hotels in New York City. It might just
Yeah.
be like standard links that are generally there, right? And then on the top or on the right, you would see an ad, like
Hmm.
click here to get a deal to stay at the Holiday Inn. click
Sure.
here. And so that's how the search engine page was. But today, if you go and search for what should I do when I'm going to New York, my colleague just did that. And she was telling me how you see pictures, right? You see like, here's top places to go in New York City. You see people also ask, which is a short question, which, if you click, you just see two lines.
Hmm.
And, you're able to understand. You see like more pictures, right? So search has become a lot more visual,
Hmm.
and you see more so in like the retail space. So
Hmm.
like 10 years ago, when you're buying a shoe, you might just see what are the best shoes out there, like blue links and ads from Nike, Zappos, what have you. Today, when you search for shoes, you see, of course you see text ads, but you see product listing ads on the top, which is a
Hmm.
picture
Hmm.
of an ad, like, and you see Nike and Zappos and DSW. Go down, you see like, what are the best shoes for the snow in Boston? You
Right.
see people also ask, you see popular products, which is literally like very visual uh, pictures
Yeah.
of ads. Then you go to the bottom, you see more text ads, you might see a map listing and so on. So to your point, versus 10 years ago, the search page has dramatically shifted,
Hmm.
and it is shifting even more. We as a company, we try to help marketers understand Google,
Hmm.
and how Google page is changing. And what we've noticed is even 2022, the page massively shifted. So we noticed like before 2022, popular products, which is like a very visual element on the page, especially you see in retail or like in e-commerce, that was like not really present. Whereas today you see so many images,
Right.
like on the page. You see like Google's increasingly wanting you to get information right there on the page, which is
Hmm.
popular. People also ask. That's rising, right? One of the other things we've heard from our clients is, they have actually brands and retailers that are not capturing more of that real estate have lost clicks. So you might be thinking like classically, I should just do paid ads and I should just do search engine optimization, write a content, and I'll be
Yeah.
fine. Maybe you were a few years ago, but
Yeah.
today that doesn't suffice. Brands and retailers and agencies that are not paying attention,
Hmm.
are seeing a loss in business. And so search is massively changing. And now with ChatGPT, Google's, I mean, I will estimate that we will see even more changes, that Google's making. Because Google's is, I mean, from what I know, like Google's trying to give you and I personalized information, right? It wants to
Correct.
answer the question that we are asking.
Yeah.
And for that, it's making all these experiments and trying to do all kinds of things.
Hmm. Yeah, I think because you mentioned like Alexa before, and I have a Google Home in my house, a Home Mini, and sometimes I've started using it to answer questions that I don't feel like Googling. Because like you said, Google is setting up their search such that you can get all the info there and you don't have to click a single link. That it's even formatted like that with the bold text and everything. And the very first thing on the page is the answer to your question. And
Absolutely.
it's shockingly accurate because what it's doing is it's pulling from the broader internet. And I think it's a really fascinating shift away from like what is the most valuable link we can give you. And part of that is because of the rise of PPC advertising, pay per click. So for folks at home who don't know, I think this is really important to contextualize what we're also talking about is that on Google search, different advertisers and companies, work with search engine optimization to get to the top. But also, especially with e-commerce, you are essentially paying Google a bid to get higher and higher onto the Google search, which means that you are not necessarily getting the most useful information. You're getting the information from the person who spent the most money, which naturally includes certain biases by who can afford to pay Google, which is why you get a lot of big company ads answering your questions for you. I think that is a sort of a negative because Google initially advertised itself and to me seemed like an information gathering source, a place that answered questions for you. And now it's a place that sends you to websites where you can buy things, which is valuable in its own right, but it is deliberately shifting like that. Mostly in part, I think, because you can't always make revenue on information. That's like a really challenging, bigger topic than what we're here for. Um, I think we also talked about like your competitors and how their visibility affects your performance on Google searches. Have you guys noticed in your data that that makes a big difference? Like if you are competing against, like if you're a small shoe company and you're competing against Nike and Adidas, you have a much harder time jumping to anybody's search as opposed to, being on a smaller scale business.
Absolutely. I think, you made a couple of very important comments. One is um, whether you're getting like the classic organic links on Google or you're getting the paid links, it requires massive investment.
Yes.
Google's a very competitive channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Google does is, even for you to get organic, you need to be credible in the eyes of Google.
Mm-hmm.
And as a small company, as a small brand, gaining the credibility is a massive investment. One.
Yeah.
Right? Second, we have noticed that big players like Amazon, for example, many times are dominating, what we see on Google. And it is because of the marketing budget that they have. And so to your point, like there's a sampling bias essentially here,
Yes. Yes.
which is the companies that have the most amount of dollars will obviously dominate the platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, I think we have to search and we have to enjoy Google with that expectation in mind.
Yeah.
Now, I think that has also created some type of friction, from folks like you and I,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like there's information overload on the Google page. Like the simple question, it's snowing in Boston. And if
Yeah.
I ask Alexa or Google, what's the weather in Boston? I just need a simple answer saying the
Yeah.
weather is 35 degrees and it's snowing versus, a page full of 20 links. I don't
Right.
have time, right? And as, with each of us users being so busy with our time, with so many things coming to our plate, we are now wanting simplicity. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one thing I said is like, we've moved from a data sparse society to a data overwhelmed society. And I think maybe like ChatGPT, is an attempt to help us be more, help these platforms be more simple. That's my
Right.
point of view. I think Google's also trying to do the same. We might see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I said two things here. One
Yeah.
is, you're right. I think clearly the companies that have the most dollars will be have dominated the platform,
Yes.
and they will dominate the platform. So if you have 10 choices on shoes, it will be the ones that have the most money, if you
Yeah.
may.
We perceive the people who are higher up as being better somehow, more relevant.
Right. And so how should these platforms unbias themselves, and how should they be surfacing perhaps more unbiased perspective to us is another question,
Mm-hmm.
but one probably that someone or some company will try to solve, or maybe it'll be Microsoft trying to solve that or attack that angle with ChatGPT. We don't know, but we're in a very fascinating time. It's important to kind of track all of this.
It definitely is because it's like it's going so quickly. I want to talk a bit more about ChatGPT and this AI trend that's been making headlines seemingly daily. I can't escape it, whether it's on Twitter with like clips of the US president being generated by AI or people making their this is a true story. A friend of mine is currently unemployed and looking for work, and he has been writing cover letters via ChatGPT and succeeding and like getting calls back, which is like such a simple but like real and effective way that AI is already changing things. And then you
Right.
hear things about like even jobs, like companies are gonna use AI to respond to the like it's basically gonna be AI talks to each other, and at the end of the day, the humans get the jobs, which is like such a fascinating topic. You seem pretty optimistic about it. How do you feel in general about this AI trend and where it's going?
Sure. So I think AI brings a lot of, so AI has its pros and cons, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think the advantage is it brings efficiency. So, the example that you noted is like, I don't know about someone using AI to write their cover letter. That's another topic on its own. I don't
Yeah.
know. And I mean, like, that may ultimately happen, but is that going to help you differentiate? Like maybe now, with very few people using ChatGPT to write a cover letter, you might seem unique or you might seem you're fast, but over time, everyone will do that. So how do you
Right.
differentiate, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's going to be a problem. I mean, what I've learned is what many marketers have said, many folks have said is let's use AI to do some of the more mundane tasks.
Mm-hmm.
We are all busy. We have more and more demands on our time, and certain things can be automated,
Mm-hmm.
right? So can you use AI, for example, if you're on the HR team, then it's right to reply to write a nice note to everyone who applies. It takes the time to apply to your company. But does it need to be a manual letter, or can it be automated, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like, you might be like, thank you, John, for applying. We will get back to you within March 15th.
Uh-huh.
Could be a standard response, and you could use AI, or
Just yeah.
Google do that. And you're all, I see like companies already do that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, I think the benefit of AI in my mind is it will in fact automate, some of the more mundane routine tasks
Mm-hmm.
where, folks that are doing it are bored or feeling like their time and creativity is not being used. And so I
Right.
think AI will free up time for the human mind to really be creative and do things that we human minds are best designed by for.
Right. By whoever.
So, and that's why I'm excited. In fact,
Mm.
like this is like 100 years ago, or not 100, maybe like years ago, decades ago, when the ATM machine came on. Imagine how that transformed, right? You could go to a ATM machine in downtown Boston Friday night after a party, and get more
Mm-hmm.
cash and go to the next restaurant. Before, you would go to a bank and you're like, oh, the bank is closed at 5 o'clock. I can't go and enjoy
You're
restaurant.
done. Right.
Right? And so I think AI is really going to open up many possibilities for us. But at the same time, it is going to benefit the ones that have access, that have information, that can feed information to the AI machines. And that's going to create a bias. We
Of
as a
course.
society, have to be careful. But that said, I am very excited, about the possibilities and how it's going to make us more productive, hopefully make us more happier because it allows us to do things that are more fulfilling.
I think productive is the key word there. Like productive in the sense that our time is not spent, for example, replying to emails just to say thank you. No, we don't need to do that anymore. A lot of this can be handled by someone else. And we don't have to outsource that. We can put that to AI for free. Uh, I think where it rubs me weirdly right now is the fact that this is being created and managed by corporations who at the end of the day have a profit mindset and they're not as worried about things like biases. So it's actually the same problem that we just talked about with search, where people who have a lot of money can and countries that have a lot of money can affect the information being presented. We already see examples of ChatGPT being like you can manipulate its bias very easily into having opinions, into targeting people in a hateful way. It's like very straightforward, and it doesn't seem like the company behind it, OpenAI, or in the case of in Microsoft and their new Bing AI tech, they don't seem interested in fixing that because the idea is supposed to be, oh, it'll fix itself. It'll naturally fix itself. If people keep putting bad things into it, it's going to act bad. It's just reflecting what people want. So I think I'm still a little bit hesitant about all of it. And I want it to do things like you're saying, give us more time, give us more flexibility with the things that are difficult or scary for us. Even like I know folks who are afraid to make phone calls, who feel anxiety around making phone calls. That's something that eventually, you can have an AI do. That's like what online ordering did for us, is it got rid of the need to call a restaurant. So it will fix problems and it'll also probably create some new problems, I think is the real thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Alan, to this point, I think it's like AI will open up many avenues for many
Mm-hmm,
folks, but I
mm-hmm,
do think that in parallel, there's got to be businesses that are started or businesses that evolve to police AI, right?
yeah,
And so just as like with all of us having PCs years ago, there were antivirus companies that were started, right? To
right,
make sure that our PCs and laptops did not get a virus, right?
right,
So I think there's business models that have been started or will be started to make sure that the bad things don't come out. It could be like nonprofits, it could be associations that the government or maybe like UN
mm-hmm,
entities like that really start up, to really make sure that this new power that we have in our hands is rightly guided and has the
right,
right checks and balances so that we are not years down the road regretting having done this.
yeah,
So And you're right. I think many times, when innovation like this comes up, the companies that are starting this, they are interested in getting adoption, right? And maybe,
Yeah.
this is like with Google when it came on board, there were a whole host of like uh, agencies that began to really tap into the Google platform and
Yeah.
support brands, maximize. I think
Hmm.
there's going to be enormous opportunities, on this mine. And secondly, I also think that media, this conversation we're having, Alan, between you and I think it's important to have conversations like this, right? And it's
Yeah.
important to kind of, I think, like, if you are living some other part of the world, if you're part of a demographics that's not the majority, I think there's going to be sampling bias, right?
Yes.
And so I feel, that the ones that are designing these models should really have capabilities to unbias it. And that comes through diversity. That comes through you letting the models be trained with signals from all over the world, you
Right.
know, from different languages, different perspectives, so that we have a
Hmm.
balanced point of view. Otherwise, it becomes very unbiased.
Exactly. Yeah, I think in the long term it will be that. It's just going, and this is the truth of it. If you're a young person and you're not aware of the stuff we're talking about, do any Google search about, like, funny enough, Google search about ChatGPT, funny or mistakes or ethical issues. Because eventually, yes, it's going to have to be regulated, but along the way, it's going to be really weird and really interesting. And we're going to find uses for it that we never thought of. I'm already hearing students using it to write papers for them, and now companies like Turnitin have to adjust to account for AI that writes papers, because, like I was saying earlier, people will use it for less than savory purposes. We're humans, we have our problems. Um, and so at the end of the day, it's reflecting back at us our own biases and mistakes, and it needs more diverse input before it can, like, reflect humanity as a whole. Because it doesn't right now. It is still coming from a very specific perspective.
Yeah, no, I
But
think that's fair, right? And I think it's important, for like the audience who are marketers or want to really be on top of this to understand this, which is it's an opportunity. But at the
mhm,
same time, just as in marketing or in any area, you need diversity in thinking to be really sound.
of
I think
course.
it's important to really like try it out. Like I was trying, like the platform online, and I was seeing like it answers certain questions very well. And once I start to ask questions about, like South Asia or Nepal, or like,
Right.
it's certain parts of the US, the answers become more and less sparse,
Yep. Yep.
or rather it's very
True.
sparse. And so understanding the limitations, is important as you maximize the power of it,
Right.
and that'll be important for all of us marketers.
Hmm. Uh, that change though, do you feel like that change is impacting leads? Ultimately, marketing, as we discussed, is a lot of it about generating leads, generating like end results for people who aren't familiar with the term. Uh, is this change going to impact the way that we have ultimately achieved leads as marketers?
Absolutely. Because, like the way that we get lots of leads these days as a business is by being on digital platforms, right?
Yeah.
Like you are, let's say Google as an example, right?
Hmm.
You're a business in Omaha, Nebraska,
Hmm.
and you want to get folks to your hotel, right? You might be like Alan's Hotel,
Yeah.
Alan's, restful, lakeside hotel in Omaha,
Mhm.
and people are finding you because they do a Google search on nice hotels in Omaha, and they show
Right.
show Alan's hotel, right? And what's happening is there's like a few changes happening. One, Google's making massive changes, and
Right.
so year ago, if you're on the top, today, if your presence is not visual, Alan,
Hmm. Hmm.
then your hotel may not be showing up at all.
Right.
And another hotel in Omaha, which is very visual, that has really optimized
Hmm.
itself for Google, might be really showing up at the top. And
Hmm.
so that means, like, the lower down you're on the page, the less clicks you get. So you might be on the top of the page a year ago. If you're not visible anymore, you might be at the bottom of the page and you might lose a click. A.
Exactly.
Number two, you might be doing ads, but let's say there's like Hilton that comes to Omaha and spends a massive ton of money, and suddenly you can't even show up on text ads,
Right.
right? So I mean, I believe that, if you're not on top of changes that the platform is making, of what competition is doing, then you will lose clicks. And that's what we've experienced. Many
Yeah.
times clients have come to us. We work with leading agencies, and the concern that even big brands have these days with the marketing muscle,
Mm-hmm.
Alan, the big brands are saying, we are continuing to spend the same amount of money, but our clicks have dropped. And they're
Exactly.
really leveraging our expertise to understand the why. And it's
Exactly.
because Google's changing a lot. And when we surface that to them, they can be like, oh, wow, it's much more visual. We should change our tactics to be more visual. Or B,
Yeah.
maybe there's times when you may be okay. The biggest player in town might be spending a fortune. Let them spend a fortune. You pause your ads for a while, and when they're away, you advertise again, or you find your niche and you advertise where they're weak. So it's critical, for marketers to be on top of these changes that Google's making and be on top of what I would say competitors are doing. And number three is really understand what consumers are doing, because consumer preferences are changing. So understanding what people like you and I are beginning to like or shop or
Mm-hmm.
do, and being on top of that is vital, I feel, for brands and companies to, I would say, retain and grow their leads.
Right. It's all about, if I'm understanding correctly, adjusting your tactics, not necessarily spending more or hoping you don't get beat out. Because yeah, if the Hilton advertises in Omaha, then my small hotel is going to be buried. But if I determine that a lot of people in Omaha tend to get hotels in groups because they have big parties and they want to do them in a hotel, very simple. I make a sales campaign that's like, hey, if you buy a hotel room with like up to 10 people, you get a huge discount. Uh
Yep.
Already I've jumped ahead of Hilton because people are looking for I know what people are looking for, and they can't respond to that quickly enough because they're Hilton. I mean, they can try, but they already dug their niche. So it's this kind of like competition, but in a healthy and sort of like dynamic way.
Yep. Yep. But it's important, right, for you to
Mhm.
understand, what your consumers are really searching for, and optimize essentially your
Right.
offer. That.
Yeah, I think ultimately search and how we use it is changing a lot, and companies like GrowByData are making that more simple to analyze that change. They're doing that work with us and for us.
Yep.
But then we also have all of these issues with AI and all of these like huge new technologies that are blowing up that are worth considering too. Um, so Prasanna, I wanted to kind of pivot to a closing question of mine that I like to ask a lot. We're talking a lot about the future and how things are changing and why they're changing. Are you yourself hopeful about the future? Because you seem like a very optimistic and definitely a very intelligent person. So I'm curious if knowing all of this stuff that like your company gives you access to and from your years of experience, if that makes you more sort of nervous or excited about the future.
Right. So there's a lot of changes in the horizon, on platforms, consumer preferences, companies are navigating changes, the world is changing, right? And
Yeah.
so, I think change to me is exciting
Mm-hmm.
because we started, I guess, I've gotten the opportunities, to study, to start a company, to really serve clients because of changes. Were there
Mm-hmm.
no changes, then our company wouldn't have been around or wouldn't have been able to deliver value. So I think, change has been helpful to me over the years. But looking ahead, I think change is, I view change as an opportunity, because change creates new avenues for companies that are not the mighty.
Mm-hmm.
It creates opportunities for the nimble, right? It creates opportunities for those that have the right thought process to create positive change, right?
Yeah.
You can create positivism. You can help your clients, you can help your communities, team members, the world, by catching on to the change and doing good. And so, I mean, I'm actually very excited because, like, I mean, the work we've done as a company, like, we track change, we're helping clients. I think the demand for that will rise. I think the demand for what's happening in the marketplace from marketers and entities will rise,
Mm-hmm.
as well as I think there is now this heightened awareness amongst many, that change is going to happen. And so for those that really want to help, I think that's a fascinating opportunity. So I'm excited, actually, Alan.
I'm glad to hear it. And you're making me more optimistic too, Prasanna, which is good because I sometimes I can get a little bit shaky or nervous about some of these changes and where they can go. But your optimism is infectious. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and I think it's also like change will bring pros and cons, right?
Hmm.
Not all change will bring good, but I think at the end of the day, we as a society have been exposed to so much change in our lifetime,
Yeah.
in the history of time, right? If we look, the world has been shaped by change, and we're alive, we're talking like this, Alan, right? And so years ago we couldn't talk like this, right? I'm even thinking
Right.
before pandemic, it was very difficult. Change brought about all these possibilities. So I think, like, as I look ahead, change will bring many positive things. But, there will be some friction, and I guess, we just have to expect some friction along the way.
Right. We've had worse. We've experienced worse and we've created more. So why not continue to do it? I really like that as a sort of a bow on this conversation. Um, Prasanna Dhungel, thank you, sir, very much for your time and energy. This has been amazing. Do you have any other questions for me? I know you're the kind of guest who likes to ask me questions. I'm curious if there's anything else you want my
Sure.
perspective on.
What's your perspective, Alan? I mean, you talk to a lot of marketers, right? And then, what type of a sentiment have you gotten from folks in the marketing world, on the podcast, in terms of change? And what seems to be exciting? What seems to be worrisome? And what should we, as professionals, responsible individuals, what should we be worried about? That, we, through, our work, through our campaigning, through our social work, through community lobbying, that we should really try to be doing to help bring this change in the right manner.
I
There
think
are a bunch of questions here, Alan, but I'm just curious, on your perspective here.
yeah, I can sort of synthesize that into a point. But being a good question asker means also knowing how to answer questions. So I'm like I like am aware of that. Man, life is really short, Prasad, as you know as well as I do, probably better than I do. And we are put on this earth with a limited amount of time to create things and to learn things. I think those are our primary goals as humans, is to create and learn things and help others do the same. Help as many people in the world do that. So as long as we can keep making things that are meaningful, whether it's marketing material, whether it's literature or any sort of art, or even something as simple as labor, it's all valuable and all important. And we need to value our own work enough that we don't live by, we don't define ourselves by how much we put out there. I think embracing change is very, very important, because not embracing it, you can end up in situations like some of my older family members who are afraid of their cell phones, for example. I was just watching, it's just a brief tangent. I was watching The Sopranos recently, the first episode of The Sopranos. The main character speaks to his older Italian grandmother, and he gives her, and this is a show from the 1990s, he gives her a CD player, and he says, I put all your records on CD. And she's so afraid of it. And she says, I don't want to use a CD player. And that's so funny to me, right? That's like 3 generations behind now. And so I think, yeah, like you're saying, change is always going to keep happening. You can choose to be left behind, you can choose to embrace it or not. But as long as you are creating and allowing others to do the same, and you are keeping yourself open-minded, I think we're all gonna be okay, with what limited time we have here. I think that is a really optimistic way to live your life, is to create and enable others. So that's sort of my
Create
take
and
on it.
enable. Yeah, that's a nice theme. Create and enable with change in mind.
Exactly. It's always going to happen. You choose whether or not to embrace it, but the point is to create and enable. So,
Thank
yeah, thank you. Prasanna, do you have anything you'd like to plug? I know GrowByData is your main company. Is there anything else you'd like to promote for folks?
Sure. So, GrowByData is a marketing intelligence partner to agencies and brands to help them really understand change happening on Google and retail media networks. And so, any business is on Google, we help clients understand how the platform is changing, how competition is changing, and provide tips on how should adjust their tactics, to maximize performance. We provide insights for them to win new business. And hopefully be of help. We're here to help. Let us know if you have any questions.
GrowByData and Prasanna Dhungel, thank you again for joining me on Talking Marketing. For folks at home, I'll be back in about 2 months. I'm aiming for. We have a couple episodes backed up, so they should be coming out more regularly once these all get recorded and produced and all of that good fun stuff. And I have a plug zone at the end for folks who are interested in volunteering, whether it's with me at the content team here at AMA Boston or speaking with AMA. We have a lot of opportunities for volunteers. If you want to sponsor the podcast, so many cool things, which you'll hear about at the tail end and hopefully at the front of the podcast as well. But that is it for now. So thank you guys so much for listening to Talking Marketing, and have a good one. If you enjoyed this episode of Talking Marketing and you want to hear more of our conversations with marketing professionals, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other major podcast platform of choice. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube as AMA Boston. And most importantly, if you'd like to support the work we do here, please consider becoming an AMA Boston member by heading over to amaboston.org/become-a-member. amaboston.org is also the #1 place to find all of our work, including the AMA Boston blog, events calendar, job board, and a whole suite of ways to volunteer with our team. We get to keep doing this thanks to the support of listeners like you. Thank you.